Exposed. How I turned a Christmas surprise into a transformative journey selling my condo for $50K. Rebecca stood outside the dusty, crumbling condo, its once bright exterior dulled by years of neglect. The air was laced with frost, but her heart felt heavier than the winter chill. Inheriting this place from Grandma had seemed like a blessing, a chance to escape the grind of her nursing shifts and student loans. But now, as layers of nostalgia peeled back to reveal the daunting reality of upkeep and expenses, she felt trapped. Memories of laughter and holiday warmth echoed in her mind, twisted by the fear of losing what had once brought her joy. The walls, now chipped and faded, seemed to mock her sentimentality. She gripped the door handle, dread coiling in her stomach. If she opened the door, she was stepping into a mess, a tangible reminder of her late grandmother's love, but also a looming burden she wasn't sure she could carry. Her mind raced with questions. Was preserving this legacy worth the financial strain? With a modest paycheck, could she ever afford to restore it? Did she owe it to Grandma to fight for this sanctuary? Even as the holiday season approached, her sense of loss felt overwhelming, and this moment, she heard laughter, a soft melody that pulled her attention. Clara, the lively neighbor next door, ambled over with a smile that radiated warmth. They settled down with steaming cups of cocoa, and Rebecca felt a flicker of hope as Clara shared tales of the neighborhood, the Christmas gatherings, the ebb and flow of the seasons, the characters that had shaped this place. This condo has potential, Clara said, eyes twinkling. If you're willing to breathe life back into it. A spark ignited in Rebecca's chest. The idea of reviving Grandma's spirit danced like the steam rising from her cup, but that glimmer was quickly overshadowed by the shadows looming in her mind. Then came the crushing news: a corporate developer was planning to purchase the entire block, tossing a veil of uncertainty over everything she had just begun to embrace. Tension tightened in her chest as the facade she loved slipped closer to decay. Loss loomed like a specter, ready to swallow all of their cherished memories. It wasn't just a financial upheaval. It was a battle for the heart of her family's legacy, her community, and her own place in it. Suddenly the stakes rose higher. More than just renovations, she felt an unexpected calling to protect the familiar faces that surrounded her. The weight of nostalgia became intertwined with a duty she couldn't ignore. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As determination battled her fears, Rebecca's thoughts spiraled. She began questioning everything. Should she pour her life savings into renovations that might soon be in vain? Or should she let it go and cut her losses, absolving herself of the burdens and grief that came with it? The joy of a renovation was overshadowed by the stark reality of losing the very essence of what Grandma had built. Her heart was torn between her own ambitions and loyalty to a home that had cradled generations. The weight of her decision crushed down, thickening the air around her with uncertainty and urgency. She stood at a precipice, realizing that in choosing to fight for her grandmother's legacy, she risked losing everything she thought was worth holding on to. What was she truly willing to sacrifice? As she took a deep breath, ready to face the storm ahead, she knew this might be the beginning of a battle that would reveal the depths of her own resilience and the true meaning of home. Rebecca stood frozen, the cold air biting at her cheeks, her thoughts swirling like the snowflakes around her. A sense of urgency gripped her mind, the kind that ignited nerves and clarified purpose. She had never characterized herself as someone who relished conflict. In fact, she preferred to navigate her world in safe, predictable currents. Yet, the impending threat from the corporate developer pushed her to a brink she had never anticipated. The reality of the looming decision felt heavier than it had moments earlier. As she gripped the doorknob, her mind flared with memories, her grandmother's vibrant laughter echoing through the hallways, the way the sunlight filtered through the window during the holiday season. Familiar moments flashed like snapshots, demanding to be preserved but tugging at the very fabric of her financial stability. She could hear Clara's encouraging words whispering in her ear, echoing with the promise of potential. The night deepened, and with it came a resolve that began to crystallize in her heart. Fighting for the spirit of her grandmother's home and the community it stood within was not solely about bricks and mortar. It was about restoring hope, a sense of belonging, and perhaps even redefining her identity. The next day, she stepped into her local coffee shop, a haven for many in the community, with a sense of the unknown hanging over her. The regulars filled the room with warmth, their chatter a comforting backdrop. As she sipped her coffee, Rebecca mentally drafted a plan, one that would involve rallying her neighbors but also facing the harsh truth of her financial situation head-on. Clara found her in a corner, her brow furrowed in contemplation. "You look like you're about to conquer the world or lose it," she smiled cautiously. "Maybe a bit of both," Rebecca replied, a blip of humor barely masking the gravity of her thoughts. As they discussed strategy, Rebecca discovered that Clara, too, had connections that could aid her cause. It felt liberating to share ideas, to pin hopes on something more than personal interest. This was about the neighborhood's legacy. Days turned into nights filled with brainstorming sessions, gaining traction from supportive neighbors who echoed her fears and aspirations. She had begun to gather a sense of community, an overlooked aspect of her life that had previously felt distant. Each evening she returned home energized, contemplating how the spirit of collaboration was infusing her once solitary endeavor. Yet, with resolution came doubt. Late at night, in the solitude of her own thoughts, Rebecca confronted the escalating uncertainty. What if the developer's resources were insurmountable? What if their motivations overshadowed the community's desires? The shadows of pessimism crept in, gnawing at her burgeoning confidence. She wrestled with tangible fears of failure, of loss, and even of success. Perhaps this fight would require more than physical renovations. She might need to cultivate resilience and tenacity from deep within. The prospect of not just saving her grandmother's legacy, but crafting her own, sent shivers down her spine. Rebecca ventured into research, scrutinizing city regulations and community engagement methods, feeling a shift within herself. She discovered facets of her own character and analytical spirit, a tenacity she hadn't realized existed. As another night approached, enveloped in a blanket of uncertainty, she couldn't shake the sense of impending confrontation. Did she possess the conviction to stand up for what she believed in? The initial fight had begun with her own heart, but now it grew into something larger to challenge the forces that threatened to strip away not just a building, but the essence of all that defined her family. This moment created a ripple effect, reverberating through the core of her being. The next day would demand her first direct confrontation with the developer's representatives, a scenario she couldn't duck out of. As she prepared herself mentally, she embraced the vulnerability of this pivotal moment. The stakes were increasingly higher as she braced herself for the battle ahead. But what she didn't quite know was if she was ready to confront the consequences of this fight. Would she rise or would she fold? Tomorrow would reveal all. Rebecca awoke to the piercing light of dawn streaming through her window, an insistent reminder that today was critical. Her heart thudded in her chest as she sat up, each beat a mix of excitement and anxiety. Today was not merely about defending a structure. It was about asserting her identity and purpose. While doubt shadowed her thoughts, determination coursed through her veins, mingling with the adrenaline of the impending confrontation. As she sipped her coffee, she reviewed her meticulously crafted notes. Each point scrawled across the page added weight to her resolve. She had researched, gathered testimonials, and even formulated arguments that showcased not only the historical significance of her grandmother's home, but its role in anchoring the community's spirit. But was she ready to present all this to a boardroom filled with corporate suits? Sweaty palms on the table, biting her tongue to keep her voice steady, it would be a test of her newfound fortitude. Arriving at the office of the developer felt surreal. The building loomed before her, a stark contrast to the warmth of her grandmother's home. As she stepped inside, the cold air echoed Julian's every calculated move. Impressively slick, yet void of any heart. As she sat across from the representatives, Rebecca's mind raced. She was not merely a woman defending her family's land. She represented a lineage, a heritage, and the values instilled in her by generations. "Ms. Fields," one of the developers began, his voice smooth yet condescending. She swallowed hard. "We appreciate your concern, but you must understand that progress is inevitable." The phrase pinged like a bell in her mind, summoning every ounce of her resolve. Progress shouldn't come at the expense of tradition. My grandmother's home is more than a property. It's a legacy, she shot back, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Curiosity flickered across the boardroom faces, and she seized the moment. The neighborhood is rich with history and connection. You may see dollar signs, but I see stories, relationships, lives intertwined within these walls. Have you ever considered what you'd dismantle in the name of progress? As she spoke, something shifted within her. The internal monologue that had once battled against her Camry of hesitation was now a roar of conviction. The developer's posture shifted, her words inciting something in the silence hanging between them. But doubt loomed like a storm cloud. What if they dismissed her? She could sense the wall of corporate indifference rising. This isn't personal, the lead developer responded, an edge sharpening his tone. You cannot stop the inevitable, we have plans. Yet she pressed on, her stomach flaring with anxiety that morphed into palpable energy. Plans can change, she asserted, her voice steady. If you truly value community and connection, you would listen instead of dictate. The discussion unfolded, dulled by a corporate cadence yet sparked by her earnest appeal. As Rebecca advocated for her grandmother's legacy, she felt the tenacity bloom within her. Each point she made resonated louder with her heart than any critique of the developer's logic. The foundation of community goes beyond profits, it flourishes on history, resilience, and collective identity, she added, remembering her grandmother's laughter. The young woman looking back from the reflective glass was not who she had been just weeks before. This was a version who would not back down. As the meeting concluded, the developer's expressions were inscrutable, impenetrable, like an armor designed to dismiss the very essence Rebecca so fervently defended. They would reconvene, they said, and consider her points. A flicker of hope ignited but was immediately tempered with anxiety about what their decision would ultimately mean. Rebecca left the building buoyed yet cautious, her feet hesitating on the sidewalk, the world continuing around her. While a glimmer of victory sparked in her heart, the weight of uncertainty pressed against her shoulders. It felt like the calm before another storm, but it was a storm she had initiated, a storm full of possibilities. Standing there, she realized this was more than just a fight for real estate, it was the fight for her own narrative. The thought battered against her conscience. What if they chose relentless development over a history she yearned to protect? What consequences awaited her determination? In that critical moment, she decided she would not wait idly. She would forge ahead, but how? The next step demanded creativity and strategy, a development that coordinated personal courage with communal aspiration. She had unshackled something within her, but where would it lead her next? The possibilities hung in the air like swirling snowflakes, each one beckoning her toward an unknown future. The weight of uncertainty pressed on Rebecca like a thick fog, but she couldn't afford to remain in limbo. That day marked a pivotal shift. It was time to strategize, to rally her scattered thoughts and fragmented emotions into a coherent plan. As she walked to her car, an idea sparked a way to not only save her grandmother's home, but also to elevate her own presence in the community. She could gather a coalition of supportive voices. There were neighbors, old friends, people who cherished the history and warmth of the neighborhood. But how would she approach them? Would they be too engrossed in their lives to care about her cause? The trepidation of rejection pulsed faintly at the edges of her resolve. Hours later, sitting in her living room, the clutter of old photos and memorabilia surrounded her like a safety net. Each cherished item whispered stories of her past, fueling her motivation. Could this nostalgia be merged with a strategy that appealed to others' emotions? She grabbed a stack of blank flyers and began drafting a community meeting announcement. The words tumbled from her mind. They felt important, urgent. The meeting would be a safe haven, a space where shared memories could rekindle collective passion. The next morning she delivered flyers door to door, feeling the thrill of each connection she made along the way. Do you remember Mrs. Field's cookies during back to school? One neighbor recalled, a smile lighting up his face. Or the block parties? Another chimed in with a laugh as stories flowed between them. The sense of nostalgia morphed into something tangible. Rebecca could see it. Expressions shifting from indifference to intrigue. It wasn't just about her grandmother's house. It was about the fabric of their shared history. Encouraged, she approached local business owners, teachers, and even the librarian who ran story hours in that very house years ago. Each voice added another layer of depth, reinforcing the idea that Rebecca wasn't alone in this fight. They all had memories tied to the home, positioned it as a vital thread in the neighborhood's tapestry. By the evening of the meeting, anticipation crackled in the air. She arranged the small community room, setting out drinks and snacks, a warm space for people to feel at ease. As she looked around, newcomers blended with familiar faces, all drawn together by a common thread of memory and belonging. Standing in front of them, she felt both small and vast, the enormity of her mission settling onto her shoulders. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "This isn't just a fight for one home. It's a stand for everything we share, our memories, our friendships, our community." The group murmured in agreement, the energy shifting toward camaraderie. "Nostalgia binds us, but what if we're able to build a future that honors our past?" As the sharing deepened, Rebecca noticed their engagement. The animated discussions sparked ideas and stories she hadn't anticipated. Friends of their grandparents stepped forward, recounting the old times, breathing life into dusty memories now connected to the present fight. She sensed the tide turning. They didn't just see her grandmother's house, they saw their own threads woven into the narrative. That was the power of unity. It could be transformed into advocacy, and advocacy could become action. Later, as the last neighbor left, Rebecca felt a blossoming warmth within her, a growing assurance that she was on the path to something stronger than individual ambition. This was the dawn of a movement rooted in shared history, an echo of resilience, and a chorus of voices fueled by passion. Now, with a foundation for her campaign against the developers, Rebecca knew she was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. However, a new question began creeping into her mind. How would she present this coalition, the stories and voices she had gathered back to the boardroom that had once felt so intimidating? The stakes were higher now, not just for her grandmother's legacy but for every person who had added their reflection to the mosaic of shared history. With that thought ringing in her mind, she prepared herself. The time for negotiation was approaching. The time had come to face the corporate developers again. Would they recognize the depth of the community's investment? Would they hear more than just a voice, but an entire chorus united against their plans? The boardroom loomed ahead like a fortress, its glass walls reflecting Rebecca's anxious expression. She had prepared meticulously, her notes filled with statistics about local history, community demographics, and anecdotes that had brought her neighbors together in recent weeks. But as she stood outside the imposing door, doubt began to creep in. Would these hard-nosed executives truly understand the emotional tapestry she had woven in that meeting? Their world seemed so detached from her own, a realm governed by profits and growth, impervious to the nuances of nostalgia and history. Rebecca took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was not just data she was presenting. This was her lifeblood, intertwined with the legacy of her grandmother and the memories of everyone who had lived in the neighborhood. When she finally stepped into the boardroom, a wave of unease washed over her as she faced the panel of developers. They sat with expressions of skepticism, their suits devoid of warmth. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to engage. A sense of urgency coursed through her, and she recognized this was more than an appeal. It was an opportunity to evoke emotion, to breathe life into the sterile atmosphere. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," she began, her voice tinged with conviction. "I'm here to talk about more than just a property. I'm here to discuss a legacy." As she spoke, she recalled the stories shared in the community meeting, the laughter of children at block parties, the scent of freshly baked cookies wafting through the air during the holidays. The developers listened, but their demeanor remained cool and guarded. Rebecca noticed a flicker of interest in one of their eyes as she recounted her grandmother's spirit, the warmth the house had brought to countless gatherings. But she pushed further, now less concerned with their initial disinterest. This was a test of her own strength and purpose. If you tear down this house, you're not just demolishing bricks and mortar. You're erasing years of community, history, connections that cannot easily be replaced, she asserted, gaining momentum. "We, the residents, are not a statistic. We're the threads that weave this neighborhood together. Each celebration, each hard time has been rooted here." The silence that followed felt charged, pregnant with possibility. The executives shifted in their seats, and for the first time, she saw the shields of indifference slightly lower. She now had their attention, but would that be enough for them to comprehend the depth of what lay at stake? Rebecca's mind raced as she observed their expressions. Internally, she grappled with the fear of outright rejection. What would happen if they dismissed her impassioned plea? But she couldn't allow doubt to dictate her next steps. She pivoted, leaning into her newfound confidence, challenging them directly. What kind of legacy do you wish to leave? One built solely on profit, or one that enriches the lives of others? Just as she thought she might be making progress, another executive interjected, his tone dismissive. We appreciate the sentiment, Ms. Dawson, but our focus must remain on feasibility and financial returns. A pang of frustration hit her. Rebecca felt the tension building, like a coiled spring ready to snap. It was time for her hidden strengths to emerge. And what if I told you that by preserving this home, the entire community would rally in support of your development to ensure its success? The room shifted again. Her strategic pivot was instinctive, a realization that transformed her fear into determination. People invest in places they care about. By integrating the history here, you not only gain community support but a brand loyal to your mission. The board members exchanged glances, and Rebecca sensed a fragile opportunity. The walls of their fortress were beginning to crack. But how would she seal the deal? As she prepared to negotiate the next phase, a mix of hope and anxiety filled her. Could she leverage their uncertainty to craft a partnership that respected the past while allowing for future growth? She dared to imagine a collaborative blueprint. Her heart raced. She was standing at the edge of something transformative. Would the discussion unfold to a mutually beneficial agreement? Or was this just the beginning of a more complex battle? As the initial tension gave way to tentative curiosity, Rebecca realized how far she had already come. But now the next challenge loomed ahead. Could she navigate this shifting dynamic and truly change the course of her neighborhood's future? The moment hung heavy in the air, charged with possibility. Rebecca's heart pounded against her chest, each beat echoing her determination. The room felt alive with potential, an atmosphere crackling with unspoken negotiations. She could sense the executive's hesitations mingling with her own. The stakes had never been higher. The once ominous boardroom now became a battleground where conviction clashed with profit-driven motives. The words lingered, and she pushed onward, feeding off the cautious optimism hanging in the air. Imagine, Rebecca said, her voice steadying, a project that celebrates not just the land, but the people who treasure it. The boldness surprised even her. She was no longer merely defending heritage. She was proposing a vision that could align with their bottom line. Look, she continued, preserving this home could transform the narrative of your entire development. It becomes a landmark, an attraction that connects visitors to the authentic life of our neighborhood. You don't just build structures. You create identity. Isn't that what sustainability is truly about? She could see the critical turn in their demeanor. A flicker of intrigue ignited behind the skepticism. A subtle acknowledgement that perhaps she wasn't just another voice droning on about sentimentality. They were beginning to see potential, not just profit, but a chance to intertwine commerce with a deep-rooted community narrative. Still, it was a tightrope walk. A sharp voice cut through the moment, one that reminded her of the primary ambition driving this meeting. Those are nice ideas, Ms. Dawson, another executive replied, but we deal in realities. What you're proposing adds risk. Our stakeholders won't support a project that could jeopardize our timelines or budgets. The thrust of their doubt hit like a wall, and for a brief moment, she felt the ground beneath her waver. There it was again, that old familiar doubt, whispering reminders of inadequacy. Yet, in that fragmented silence, Rebecca dug deep into her reservoirs of strength. This was personal. This wasn't just about a house. It was about the identity she had inherited. A narrative that spoke for those unable to voice their fears. Then let us talk reality, she countered. The reality is, by disregarding the history entwined in this space, you're courting failure. People are drawn to places with stories. They won't invest in cold, sterile developments that lack soul. Your projections could be improved with a vision that respects the past. The pulse of the room shifted. Each executive exchanged glances again, a cautious recalibration of their understanding. Rebecca felt it, a collective recognition stirred by her words, muscle memory of corporate ambition, meeting genuine human connection. But they remained apprehensive. She could feel the tension tighten like a noose. Let us meet this challenge head-on, she proposed, an idea crystallizing. What if we formed a task force? A small team dedicated to integrating history into the development process? Involve community voices, embed narratives into your design, write a new chapter together. Outrageous as it sounded, Rebecca embraced the edge of her proposition. It felt invigorating to step beyond traditional boundaries, demanding respect not merely for a home but for the complexity of shared experience. The executives leaned forward, intrigue sparking amidst their hesitations. The room, once a fortress of cold dismissal, began to warm with the fragile thread of potential collaboration. It was daring, an uncharted path she had unwittingly forged. Rebecca, one of them, interjected cautiously, "This is new territory for us. We need time to review this approach." The familiar tug of delayed resolutions both thrilled and terrified her. Could this escape into uncertainty yield the transformative outcome she daydreamed of? The possibility of partnering with them ignited her instincts further as the discussion wound down. Rebecca sensed an impending shift in her destiny. Perhaps she had cracked open a door, but would they walk through it with her? With the meeting adjourned, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped her. As she exited the boardroom, the weight of anticipation hung in the air. Would her journey culminate in a partnership that changed the landscape of her neighborhood forever? Or was this murky path leading her into greater turmoil? In the bittersweet glow of uncertainty, Rebecca braced herself. The stakes felt dangerously high. She was standing at the precipice of a new beginning or a complete unraveling. When the phone rang later that evening, the only word echoing in her mind was, "What's next?" The next morning, sunlight streamed into Rebecca's apartment, casting warm shadows that danced around familiar corners steeped in memories. Yet the glow couldn't soften the tight knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. She kept replaying her pitch, dissecting every word and gesture, searching for hidden flaws. Was it enough? Or too raw, too ambitious for the world she was trying to influence? The phone rang, snapping her from her reverie. It was Andrew, a colleague from her company who had supported her through the project's inception. "Hey Beck, how did it go?" His voice held a buoyancy that grounded her, a reminder of the camaraderie she decultivated. "It could have gone worse," she replied, hesitant to fully invest in the optimism. "They haven't outright rejected me." An awkward silence hung between them. It felt like both a victory and a disappointment, a precarious balance that left her feeling unsteady. "Let us grab lunch. You need to breathe and I want to hear all the details," Andrew suggested. His confidence was infectious, and for a moment, she considered how a little support might bolster her shaky resolve. As they sat across from one another at a bustling cafe, Rebecca shared her experience. "I felt empowered when I spoke about the project," she admitted. "But what if they decide against the proposal? What if they choose profit over history?" Andrew leaned back, fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. "You stirred something in that room, and there's no turning back now. Even if they deny your vision, you've sown the seeds. You're fighting for something important. And that's not just for you, it's for the community." His words resonated like the first notes of a familiar song. She realized it wasn't just about winning over the executives. It was about nurturing a conversation. The rest of the day dragged as she returned to her desk, awaiting updates that never came. Each tick of the clock magnified her uncertainty, but in every lull, a tinge of determination sparked behind her frustration. Later that afternoon, Rebecca walked to the park, seeking solace among the familiar trees that had witnessed her quiet development over the years. The leaves rustled softly, as if whispering encouragement. She recalled her father's stories, recounting the wisdom of their family's history, tales of resilience and hope woven into the fabric of her upbringing. She had inherited that tenacity, carrying a torch of heritage that ignited her passion. Suddenly, a different kind of resolve gripped her, a realization that waiting for a decision was not enough. She sprang into action, drafting proposals for potential partnerships with local historians and artists. She envisioned a community engagement plan that could press excitement into the executive's hands. That evening, Rebecca didn't just sleep. She plotted and imagined the possibilities, sustaining herself on caffeine and conviction. The following morning, her email to the executives was a tapestry of her new ideas, enhanced not just by statistics but by heart, a vivid narrative beckoning them to broaden their scope, When the reply finally arrived, it bore no immediate acceptance or denial but instead a request for a follow-up meeting. What was once a flicker of hope blossomed into a tentative flame. Yet, as excitement bubbled in her chest, a new doubt emerged. How could she elevate her pitch further? The path she had carved demanded every ounce of her authenticity, and she realized this moment called for not just confidence, but strategic finesse. As she prepared her notes, a question loomed large over her plans. Would this approach deepen their investment, or would it merely serve as another novelty for their corporate agenda? Rebecca was ready for confrontation, fueled not only by ambition but by a voracious hunger to enact change. The next meeting would be the proving ground for her evolution from a mere voice to a champion of her vision. It wouldn't be easy, but she understood now that the personal stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The corporate world was about to face her truth head-on, which inevitably led her to question, what would it take to turn their hesitation into true partnership? Rebecca felt the weight of her ambition pressing down as she arrived at the conference room, her heart racing with every step. It was more than a meeting. It was a crossroads that would define her trajectory. She stood before the large glass windows, catching a glimpse of the city sprawling beneath her, a blend of progress and forgotten stories. Her fingerprints were all over the pain of the past, ready to mold it into a vision that deserved attention. She envisioned the executives seated around the polished table, scrutinizing her proposal. Each one harbored their own agenda, but her goal was to pull them into her narrative, to make them part of something larger than themselves. The uncertainty fluttering in her stomach sharpened her focus. This was her moment that as the meeting commenced, she allowed her rehearsed patter to fall away, transforming her delivery into a conversational flow. "Thank you for the opportunity to meet again," she began, her voice steady yet energetic. She leaned in slightly, both inviting and commanding, as she unraveled her proposal with the fervor she had cultivated in the Park's embrace. "I believe we often overlook the stories that ground us. This project isn't just about preserving a building. It's about preserving identity, our shared past that influences our future." Her fingers gripped the edges of the presentation materials, anchoring her as she shared vivid examples of how local history could bridge divides and spark enthusiasm. The table remained silent. Rebecca could see eyebrows raised and fingers tapping against laptops. They listened, but were they truly engaged? Beneath the surface of her confidence, a nascent anxiety began to creep back in. What if this fell flat? What if her passion proved insufficient against the coldness of corporate priorities? Yet, in that silence, Andrew's supportive words echoed in her mind, urging her to lean into the discomfort. This was a chance, a test of everything she embodied. Moreover, she continued, this is not just about what we can sell. It's about investment in our shared legacy. It's a choice to stand with the community. The mood in the room began to shift. She could feel it, a subtle change in the air as they exchanged glances. Someone shifted in their seat, and another cleared their throat. The stirrings of interest began to unfurl, igniting her drive. Rebecca realized she needed to extend her reach further. Imagine collaborating with artists, historians, and the voices of the community, she suggested, presenting her revised business model that not only included financial projections, but highlighted the emotional and cultural value. Framing her vision this way demanded more than a response. It provoked thought. Could her yearning for authenticity and community ignite momentum within these walls? As she drew closer to the end of her presentation, she articulated her call to action. The decision to partner with us is not merely a financial choice. It's a commitment to a new journey. Together we can inspire change and shape narratives that matter. The room erupted into a flurry of discussion, questions pinging back and forth with renewed vigor. She felt exhilarated, engulfed in a small wave of confidence. Yet, there was something deeper, a realization that under the guise of professional development, she had discovered a purpose much larger than the sum of her efforts. She was crafting a narrative not just for a project, but for a vision that mattered deeply to her. As the meeting concluded, Rebecca stepped away with a cautious optimism. The executives were intrigued, teetering on the cusp of commitment, hungry to dive into the potential she had laid bare. However, as she walked away, her pulse quickened with another wave of uncertainty. Did she truly connect with their motivations? Were they ready to embrace her vision wholeheartedly? Or was this just another fleeting interest? She felt motivated to refine her strategy further, to prepare herself for the next chapter of this endeavor. The flickering excitement intertwined with the remnants of doubt prompted her to consider a new question. What would she do if faced with direct opposition from those who prioritized profit over purpose? Rebecca paced the empty corridor after the meeting, her shoulders taut with unspent energy. The enthusiasm in the room had sparked something deep within her, a flickering hope that she could indeed navigate the choppy waters of corporate motivations. But what if the tide turned against her? The question buzzed relentlessly in her mind, demanding attention and providing little comfort. She reached her desk and sank into her chair, fingers drifting over her laptop keys. Could she craft a strategy that focused on resilience over resistance? She needed to prepare not just for the next pitch, but for the inevitable counterarguments that would come from those more invested in the bottom line than the richness of history. She closed her eyes and imagined those figures from the conference room, calculating risks and weighing profits, devoid of a connection to the spirit of her project. Rebecca's thoughts turned inward. She had always considered herself someone who could sell passion, but what happened when that passion met financial concerns head-on? It was time to recognize her own vulnerabilities and explore how those might paradoxically amplify her strength. Maybe her answer lay in understanding their perspective, how to reshape her narrative to resonate, even with skeptics. She sketched out a plan, jotting down ideas that reconciled profit with purpose. What if she framed her project as a dual opportunity? Cultural investment can drive long-term financial gain, she whispered to herself, the words feeling oddly empowering. By highlighting the economic benefits, not just the emotional allure, she could potentially capture their interest from a different angle. But manipulating data without compromising her values felt tricky. The challenge was about projecting authenticity while appealing to self-interest. It was a balancing act, one that required honing her narrative without diluting its essence. Could she provide empirical evidence to support her instinctual belief that rich histories could indeed fuel economic growth? The thought of statistical charts and case studies suddenly felt invigorating rather than daunting. She spent the next several days digging into research, studying how companies successfully leveraged local heritage in other markets. They had transformed industrial zones into thriving cultural centers, generating not just goodwill but tangible revenue. Armed with concrete examples, Rebecca felt her confidence returning. As she combed through resources, she realized she was also developing a deeper understanding of her own limits. She was not simply a dreamer. She was a strategist who could adapt. It felt empowering to draw connections between her ideals and the harsh realities of the business world. That duality became a wellspring of newfound resilience. But just when her excitement reached a crescendo, she received a call that sent a flood of anxiety through her. One of the top executives, known for his stringent focus on profit, was looking to meet her at the end of the week. "Don't let him intimidate you," she muttered. As if trying to absorb that advice herself, she felt a mix of trepidation and anticipation. This could be where her vision either gained traction or found itself repealed. What would she say when he inevitably challenged her assertions? Doubt clung to her thoughts, casting shadows over her preparations. Yet there was something within her that whispered, "You've prepared for this." It was time to put her theories into practice and face the most challenging opponent yet. A confrontation where she would need to affirm her values while engaging in hard-nosed negotiations. As she clicked off her laptop, the image of the executive loomed large in her mind. She had an opportunity to redefine what this project could mean not just for her, but for an entire community yearning for recognition. With renewed determination, she made a list next to her notes. Reasons why the project mattered to her, the importance of historical relevance, and the economic case she decrafted. But as she did so, doubt again trickled in, whispering fears that filled her with unease. Would her emotional appeal stand up to his financial scrutiny? She stood up, pacing her space like a warrior preparing for battle. This was going to be more than just an argument of numbers. It was about conviction, about fighting for purpose in a world that often celebrated profit over passion. And as that thought settled in her heart like an anchor, she realized she would not back down. It was time to embrace the challenge. Would her vision withstand the scrutiny of relentless pragmatism? The answer lay just ahead, poised on the brink of confrontation. Rebecca stood before the familiar walls of her grandmother's condo. The once daunting structure now softened by her myriad of memories, each frail and wood-framed moment twisted together, creating an unwavering resolve within her. The corporate fight had pushed her beyond her limits, shaping her into an advocate, a fierce protector of history and heritage. Months of negotiations had instilled a solid confidence she hadn't known before. The initial fear of loss transformed into a determination that radiated authority. She had learned how to present data, mold community sentiments into sound arguments, and most importantly, defend what truly mattered. Today marked the closing of a chapter and the start of another. The developer had officially backed down, agreeing not only to preserve her grandmother's home, but to collaborate with the community on designs that honored its legacy. She had walked in as an apprehensive woman seeking comfort but walked out as an assertive individual delivering a message of possibility. The moment she received the signed agreement, a wave of exhilaration surged through her veins. As she stood there, she noticed Clara watching from a distance, her face beaming with pride. Gone was the air of uncertainty that once engulfed her. Instead, Rebecca felt recognized, not just as a granddaughter, but as a formidable advocate representing countless voices within her neighborhood. "Congratulations, Rebecca," Clara exclaimed as she approached. Rebecca's grin widened at her neighbor's words. It wasn't just validation, but acknowledgement of their joint effort to save a piece of their shared history. Every late-night strategy session, every community meeting, every interaction had now culminated in tangible success. Reflecting on the journey, Rebecca realized that her evolution was punctuated by moments of vulnerability that had evolved into strength. Unraveling that emotional tapestry had not weakened her cause, it had fortified it. She now had the insight to recognize the weight of nostalgia, blending it seamlessly with a vision for a sustainable future. The community meeting she had envisioned 2 months prior was now a hub of excited conversations about the upcoming renovations. Each neighbor's eagerness to reclaim the neighborhood knitted their lives back together, awakening a fabric of solidarity that had remained dormant for years. "Today we marked a victory that goes beyond bricks and mortar," she addressed the crowd gathered at the renovated community center. As she spoke, the warmth of their connection ignited a sense of belonging that she had long yearned for. "Together we saved not just a home, but our history, our identity." Her once modest job in nursing had now transformed into a leadership role within the community. Personal fulfillment wrapped around her like a comfortable sweater, her newfound competence recognized both internally and externally. As the applause echoed, Rebecca felt a deep sense of accomplishment that roots ran deeper than pride in achievement forged from struggle, community, and resilience. She had spurred a collective recognition that was thriving through individual narratives. "Let us keep building," a fellow neighbor called out, and Rebecca's heart soared. This was more than an aspiration now, it was a unified mission. The condo had awakened more than just nostalgia. It had inspired a movement resonating across her neighborhood, one defined by love for place, respect for history, and the audacity to face any challenge. As she stepped outside, the sun's rays kissed her cheeks, casting light on a future that brimmed with possibility. She had triumphed, not because of her past, but thanks to how she chose to embrace it. And now, this moment crystallized in her mind. Her personal journey had unfolded from fear to fierce fulfillment. One decision had woven her narrative, a legacy forged through individual transformation and profound growth. She had become an established beacon of advocacy and aspiration. The journey had shaped her. She had proven to herself that she could conquer any odds, not simply for herself but to lead her community toward brighter days. In this final chapter, she understood the power of purpose, and her heart swelled with gratitude for every struggle that laid the groundwork for this triumphant resolution. As Rebecca walked away from the gathering, she felt an unshakable bond with her community. It was the dawn of a new era, not just for her grandmother's home, but for everyone willing to fight for their legacy. And now you need to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this riveting conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Show your true fandom for extraordinary stories of overcoming adversity.